talk about number to string conversions in C++, right? This is a pretty common task that you might have done before. And one way to accomplish this in C++ is you can use something called a standard toString, right? I have used this quite a bit, and this is like one of the ways you can convert a number to a string, right? It can take in an int or a float or a double or anything, right? So let's say this is no, right? If you think about this, right, this operation is kind of slow, right? And why is it slow? Right? To convert this number to a string, it needs to make a string, which means it needs to allocate memory on heap, right? And allocating memory on heap can be expensive and it can make your operations slower, right? We know that. The second reason it's kind of limited is it can throw exceptions, right? And if it throws exceptions, that means your code that's doing this operation has to deal with it, right? So this can add a bit of an overhead. The third problem with toStrings is it has to respect the locale, right? The locale of the system. Now, this can also make your operations slower. So, given all these reasons, right, in C++17, there was a new method introduced to convert a number to a string, right? And let's change some colors here. It's called standard toChars, right? This method does not involve any heap memory allocation. So this is totally gone, right? It does not involve handling or dealing with any exceptions, right? There's no problem of locales, right? So this ends up becoming the fastest way you can convert a number to a string, right? Now, how does it do it? Why is it efficient, right? This function takes in a buffer, right? To be more specific, it takes in a start of the buffer, like a pointer to the start of the buffer, and it directly writes to this buffer. So let's say you're converting a number 967, right? It's going to look at each digit one by one, starting from the least significant bit, and it's going to write to the buffer, right? It also takes in the base. Obviously, it takes in the number that you want to convert, so that becomes the third argument to the function. The first two are character start and end pointers, and it also takes in a base. I think base by default is 10, but it can take in anywhere between 2 to 36, right? So let's look at an example next. All right, team. So before we move on to an example, I want to talk about what this function returns, right? This function returns a struct which has two things in it, right? It has two members. The first member is nothing but a pointer, right? It's a char pointer, and the if the conversion was successful, right, this pointer will point to a location in memory which is one past the last character in your buffer that just got written to it, right? So it will point to this location here, which is one past the last character. And the second thing that's part of this struct is an enum, right? Let's call it error code. And if there was any kind of a failure, obviously this enum will be filled, and there's a whole bunch of error codes that it can take in. And on a success case, this enum will be empty, right? So just something to keep in mind. And now let's look at a code example.
All right, so let's look at an example, right? Let's build a really simple program that converts an number to a string, right? So let's write a function and let's call it convert to string, right? uh, let's pass in an integer for now. Let's call it num, and let's think about how to convert this number to a string, right, using our new function toChars, right? So standard toChars, right? This toChars takes in a bunch of things, right? The first thing is it takes in a start pointer, right? A start to a buffer, right? So let's create a buffer here, char buffer, and let's give it a size 5 for now. Remember guys, the size is very important, right? The buffer has to be large enough to hold this number, right? If it's not, we are going to encounter problems, right? And I'll show you how. But the first thing it takes in is a pointer to the start of the buffer. Then it takes in a pointer to the end of the buffer, right? So let's do buffer plus 5 in this case, and it takes in the value, right? Now, if everything goes well, this should convert your number to a string, right? Let's also capture the return type. So in, let's use structured bindings here. And like we said earlier, it returns two things, right? It returns a struct which has two members, right? First is the pointer, which will point to a location in the memory that's one past your last character in the buffer, and it takes in and it returns an error code, right, which is an enum. So we can then, after the conversion is done, we can then check the error code, right? If the error code is good, and by good I mean if it returned a enum that's empty, right? So it returns something called error C, and if it's empty, that means success. Our conversion was successful, right? Else we had a problem, right? There was a problem converting or something, right? And one other thing to remember here is to use this function, you will need the char include, so don't forget to include that. But let's do something here in case of success, right? Let's add a cout and let's print the stringified number, right? So let's use standard string view so that we avoid making a copy here. And string view takes in the buffer and it takes in the number of characters, which in our case is 5, right? Now let's use this function. Let's pass in a number that's 5 digits long. So let's say 54321. Hopefully if we did everything right, this should print out our number in string format. There you go guys, right? So we did everything right. And just for experimentation, let's pass in one more digit, right? So let's make our number 6 digit long and let's see what happens. Hopefully we should go in this else clause. Okay, so let's add a cout here to prove that we actually went into the else clause, right? Let's say there was a problem. Let's copy this string, right? There was a problem converting, right? If we run this, yeah, there you go, right? So there was a problem converting. Why? Because you're asking it to convert a 6 digit number, but your buffer is not big enough, right? So if I change this to 6, hopefully things should start working fine, right? Let's run this program, and there you go, right? It again successfully converted the number that you gave it to string. So guys, this is it. This is one of the fastest methods to convert a number to a string, right? Feel free to play around with it, feel free to experiment with it. And as always, if you liked the video, uh, please hit the like button and please leave comments in the section below, right? All right, thank you very much guys.